Hello everyone, and welcome to another video. So for a while now, I've been collecting videos, merchandise, and info about Dark Cloud's beta. It's one of the greatest holy grails in gaming. Since we'll most likely never get a chance to play, I wanted to make this video to show as much of it as possible. Our first look at Dark Cloud came along during the earliest days of the PlayStation 2. It was back in autumn of 1999 when people made their way to Makuhari Messe in Japan for the latest Tokyo Game Show event. The crowds gathered to witness the next generation in gaming. Developers showed off their best and latest. All of the big names were there: Capcom, Square, Sega, the list goes on. Also in attendance was Sony Computer Entertainment, who was there to introduce one of the greatest gaming consoles of all time, the PlayStation 2, and the hype was unreal. The many new impressive features and graphics of the PS2 were mind-blowing for the fans, and many got a chance to try out some of the first games ever made. Many of these were well-known franchises, but others were never seen before. Level 5, a new and groundbreaking studio, showed off their first game that would come to the PlayStation 2, known as Dark Cloud. However, this was a completely different game, not recognizable to the final version we all know and love today. What we got to see at Tokyo Game Show 99 was an innovative and a much more Georama-focused Dark Cloud. Sadly, this tech demo was short-lived and was rarely ever seen, especially outside of Japan. I don't think we'll ever actually get our hands on the playable demo. The only time it could ever be played was back at the game booths they had set up at the event. No hint of a disc or an ISO of it has ever come up. The best we can do is preserve all of the footage and photos of it that we possibly can. I've never stopped looking for it myself, and after many years of thorough searching, I wanted to make this video to show the world what else the beta had in store. Sit back and relax, because you're about to see a definitive collection of all known and never before seen Dark Cloud beta content. Besides the original trailer and screenshots that are much more common, I've gathered up interviews, photos, and other rare footage. Most of the media that featured the beta version was in Japan, which is why it can be so hard to find. Through long searches, I've found many rare magazines, Japanese websites, and PS2 press kits from 1999 that have info on it. There's always more footage that can show up, and I hope it does. I'll also never give up hope on us getting to play the beta ourselves someday. So there were two places where the beta was shown off at. First was at the PS2 event stage where they played movies of other launch games and demos, Dark Cloud among those where they showed off a 4-minute clip. Then they also displayed it at the gaming booths near the stage off to the side, with previews and the playable demo. It looks like Sony's booths and stage were set up in Southern Halls 5 and 6. It's kind of hard to read the maps, but it looks like these two halls would be right at the center of the event. It's surprising we didn't get to see more footage of the PS2 booths and Dark Cloud. But again, it was a tech demo at the time, and there were bigger franchises like Gran Turismo 3 that had an established fanbase. Plus, being in the US, we didn't get to access media from other countries so easily back then. The beta trailer was shown on stage in front of the crowds, being projected onto a screen. Luckily, there was a lot of press and people who were there to cover it, so we got to see this trailer thanks to their footage. The video I'm about to show is the best quality of the original trailer available, and has been completely translated to English. Let's take another look at this forgotten piece of gaming history. It's incredible what we could have gotten. The Georama had so much more building potential, and the game had such beautiful aesthetics. Along with the customization, many players who have watched this video feel like they've missed out, and nobody can blame them. Of course, I love the Dark Cloud we got, I definitely can't complain about that, but this beta is my favorite out of any game beta I've ever seen. The developers talked about the water a lot, and you'll see why. Early on they paid special attention to details, and that paid off both in the beta and in the final release. This game had so much heart. Even Tone looked so chill and like the perfect character for a Georama-centered game. Then there's the magic carpet, which was such a neat little touch. Who wouldn't want to fly around on that? Besides the main trailer, some alternate clips also show the dialogue with Allnet that wasn't shown with the original footage. This clip might have been shown with the full trailer on the PS2 event stage, or maybe at a booth where it would idle if nobody was playing, where it would also show trailers like this. So in this clip, we get to see Allnet's dialogue lines where she breaks the fourth wall and tells us the game is still in development and the demo has a ways to go. It's just another small but neat detail to check out. Then over at the PS2 booths behind the stage, they had TVs and consoles set up where you could actually play the games. In this clip, we can see some of the setups they prepared before Tokyo Game Show 99, possibly showing the Dark Cloud beta disc here. What's especially rare is seeing footage of gameplay on these TVs they brought in. Until earlier in 2022, there was only a few seconds of footage of the Dark Cloud beta being played at these booths. Miraculously, over 22 years later, Adam Dury, a media executive from Ziff Davis and IGN who attended these sort of events back in the day, shared some of his rare TGS 99 footage. His video includes never before seen Dark Cloud beta gameplay that showed some features we never knew about until now. The last few mysterious tabs in the Georama menu were finally shown. In the last segment shown here, we can see that you were able to change the time of day from the menu to day, evening, and nighttime. Although a bit wobbly from the camera, we do get to see some of the clearest footage ever of some parts, plus a good look at a nice Georama build with some buildings we never got to see much, or at all. The Georama was still a pretty fresh concept. The era of 3D world building and terraforming games were just starting to become more popular. Many of these games were a great inspiration for the creation of Dark Cloud's Georama, like ActRaiser and Soulblazer. Then in 1998, Lionhead Studios created Black and White, which was another highly innovative God-style world-building game released on Windows and Mac. Players were given a lot of freedom to help build and expand villages for the tribes, with landscaping, constructing buildings, and training your avatar like creature, which is a core aspect of the game. You could be a good, neutral, or evil god depending on what you want to do. The villagers are always judging your actions to decide. It was a huge success, and a favorite for many gamers. Lionhead Studios, which was a breakaway of Bullfrog Studios, was always on the cutting edge of the terraforming genre. They went all the way back to the Amiga and DOS days with a game called Populous, and later Dungeon Keeper and the Black and White series. Populous was a simple but neat game where you can form the land so your people can build houses. They would improve the houses depending on how much land you flatten for them nearby, eventually creating castles, which you would need to spawn knights to fight the evil in the world. You can form the land how you want though, sometimes having to create and remove land bridges across water. Then there's the god options like earthquakes to disrupt your enemy with. In a 2011 GDC post-mortem talk, renowned game developer and Bullfrog Studios co-founder Peter Molyneux spoke about how he brought Populous to life. It's a talk that any fan of the genre should go check out. He goes into great detail of how he designed these sort of games. When asked why he focused so much on simulation, he says he's always had an unbelievable passion of creating a world that seemed to live. I think the result of that passion became a strong inspiration for many world-building games to come. The only other time that the Dark Cloud beta was shown was at COMDEX 1999 in Las Vegas, Nevada. Also known as the Computer Dealers Exhibition, COMDEX was a huge computer expo show, one of the largest in the world. It was traditionally held in Las Vegas every year sometime in November, but there were also many COMDEX shows held in other countries. At this particular event, in November of 1999, we would see 2 more minutes of the beta presented by Phil Harrison, Sony's Vice President of Research and Development at the time. He played through the demo and highlighted some features about the beta that were never revealed before. The footage is pretty rough, but it's the best we got. The huge amount of other tech shown off definitely overshadowed it, which is probably why we never got to see more coverage than this. Video games were clearly not the main focus at the event, but it looks like they made an exception for the PlayStation 2. Let's check out this clip and see what new features Sony plan to share.
Being developed in Japan, and you can see here that once again everything being created in real time. This is not a movie. The cloth dynamic being calculated in real time on the magic carpet, the hair blowing through the wind of the boy, the wind blowing through the clothes that he wears. Now we can actually go in and visit some of the environments that have been created. There's 1,000 different environments that you can visit in this world, and so here we go. Now, nothing in my world, but I can very simply create some aspects to this world, drop them down, and visit that immediately. Now, in the needs of scheduling, I'm going to show some things that I've created ahead of time, and you'll be able to see some of these worlds that we spent a few hours building last night. And we were somewhat inspired by the beauty of the Las Vegas sunset, and that allows us to move around, and you can see just how spectacular the view is. Now, this world allows you to create not only the environment that you explore, but the characters that you meet as well. And ultimately, in a broadband world, the people that you meet will be real. And you can see the lens flare that we can get through the trees as well as the sun is set.
Before its showing at COMDEX, many of these features were completely unknown, except maybe for the people who got to play the game at the demo kiosks. Phil emphasized just how much potential there is to customizing the world, saying there's 1,000 different environments to explore, though in the demo the only places we get to see are the floating island and Brown Boo Village. The floating island accounts for a lot of that, but it makes me wonder how much more you could build in the other areas on the map. Imagine having this level of detail in the Georama for Naroon, Matataki, and everywhere else. Would have been nice, but they only had room for so much, and the Georama had to work with the story. You still get freedom with placement and some items like the trees and rivers. IGN was the only outlet that reported on Dark Cloud, and maybe the only outlet to report on any games at all. Sony President Nobuyuki Idai was there as well to speak about the PlayStation 2, confident that it would change the way we use TV. And that really did end up happening, with how incredibly popular the console became. He even claimed its multimedia abilities would overshadow the role that once belonged to the PC. And for gaming, it certainly did at the time. You could even play movies on it. So looking at the map, we can guess what some other locations might have been, based on what was finally released. To the west, we see the ocean and a pier leading out to a small building, then a few more buildings on the shore. It looks like there's also docked boats there, making this the best candidate for Queens. Then to the desert in the southwest, definitely Muskalaka. It looks like there's a village in front of a large tower. We can see some small buildings with smoke coming from them, and some dunes surrounding it. Maybe the Sun and Moon Temple was the tower, but changed to more of a pyramid style later to tie the Egyptian theme together. To the east, I'd say most likely Naroon, but it's too plain to say for sure. Naroon is the open grassy village in the hills though. It looks like there might be a temple of some sort here, or a large city hall. Finally, at the center would be Dark Heaven Castle. Surrounded by the gaping pit in the world stood the home of the Dark Genie, or other evil villain in development. According to IGN, this pit is where the floating continent originated. The boy's quest was about returning the island to this pit, and to uproot the evil kingdom that took its place. What stands out most on the map is the animated floating continent. When selected, it'll hover around in the sky surrounded by the clouds. It creates a more lively and colorful world. Dark Cloud never took full advantage of this extra sort of detail in the final game sadly, though the map they chose with its colors and areas drawn out is still a creative and fitting design for the game. On to more features, Level 5 had even planned to have multiplayer features, where at the very least you could visit other people's worlds that they built. As for collaborating while building, he never confirms that part, but it'd be a neat idea to build with your friends online. Another super useful feature he showed off was the ability to save and load everything that you built on the floating island. This tab was never before seen, but now we can see that there were 3 places where you could save and load your world, another handy way to keep on building and trying something new, while being able to save your progress. Lastly, he says you'll be able to create the characters you meet as well. I haven't actually seen this done in any of the footage, so I'm assuming that's another work in progress. It'd be a feature where you can customize each character and place them around the floating continent. Maybe you could even assign them to a certain house or other building like in the final game. We still do get plenty of choice where to place things in the Georama, but the variety and potential that the beta had available was huge compared to it. You could place many different styles of buildings and a lot more trees, rivers, and paths. There were also a few land masses you could build on top of. The plateaus are like the ones that made it into the final game in Matataki Village, except they can be much larger than those. Finally, the largest landmass players could build were volcanoes. Yes, you could build multiple volcanoes in your town if you wanted to. Those definitely would have taken up way too much space though, so it makes sense that they never returned. Changing the weather was also planned, but didn't make it into the beta or final game. Changing the seasons, making it rain or snow, would have been another addition, giving the game that much more life. However, it probably turned out to be too much work for a less important part of the game. Through its development to the final release, the Georama had to be greatly refined to work with the story. Almost nothing survived from the beta, pretty much just paths, trees, and rivers. Looking into Dark Cloud's files, we can see an early beta Georama menu, showing yet another significant change in the Georama system. It's another faithful Dark Cloud design. I like the town icon and setup they had here, though it still wasn't nearly as custom as the beta Georama menu. This was much closer to the game's release, as we can see many familiar parts, as well as Macho and Camacho. The original 1999 menu itself had so much more openness and creativity to it. Thanks to the combined footage we have, every tab's function has been revealed. From the top, the list starts with land masses, where you could place the hills and plateaus, terrain parts, such as mountains and lakes, houses and buildings, which we saw in action, where multiple houses were placed in the demo, time of day, where you could switch between day, evening, and nighttime, the break operation, which was the selection for destroying placed parts, and then finally loading and saving your dioramas. So under these tabs, we get to see most of the menu in action. Here's the translations for everything we were able to see, but were only shown briefly. Everything else I've included in the captions so far. Luckily, the footage caught these parts. Here's the descriptions for Plateau B and A. There's a smaller mass B, which is 5x5 blocks, and then a larger mass A, which is 10x10. Then there's the House tab, where you could place a level 2 brick house or a fancy house. In the Time of Day tab, their descriptions reveal a bit more that would go on in the world. None of this was happening yet, as we don't see any of the villagers. During daytime, the inhabitants would be working outside and walking around. During the evening, they will return home and be inside, so they'd be easy to find if you didn't get to them in the afternoon. The nighttime text is pretty rough. The most that could be made out is that you can see some things that can only be seen at night, maybe monsters or other creatures of the night. The Load Diorama tab mentions you can see animals in the world that Phil Harrison built. Though none are here, it's interesting to see that'd be yet another thing that you could customize. They managed to take this on well in the Georama and include some with Tone's Llama and Zio at least. The original Departure also had a much nicer melody to it if you ask me. This version was played at TGS through speakers on stage. It used actual instruments instead of MIDI files, so the attendees got to hear the best version of it there. It sounds so much smoother, and some of the tones are higher, making the song really shine. Still, Departure is solid in game. It's a shame this song is really only played once at the very beginning in Naroon Village. The beta did get shown again for a short bit at the Game Developers Conference in 2000. It was presented by Phil Harrison again, though it was only a clip that we've seen before. Everything else at the event was about the PlayStation 2's new technology in general. When it came to show off Dark Cloud, they used footage from the release version of Dark Cloud, and then a beta clip at the end to show off the water details. I think they left that clip in particular in the promo video because those water details were just insane. For the time, there was nothing else like it. It takes a lot of work and expertise to achieve these sort of looks. Dark Cloud's effects in general were excellent for all gaming standards at the time, and even beats out PS2 games that were released much later. Besides the few lucky souls who got to try out the demo back then, it's unlikely any of us will get our hands on it. It was held pretty closely at those events and by the presenters who had them. Another instance where they used beta screenshots for advertising purposes was on a GameStop poster. The magic carpet is something that was just too difficult to pass on showing. They used beta tone, new tone, and screenshots of the final version. Weird combo, but I think it has a lot of charm. It's one of the few pieces of US media showing any beta content. Pretty neat touch on their part. Besides this poster and at COMDEX, the only other known instance of it in US media was in PlayStation Magazine's November 1999 issue. It goes into its basic details about the Georama, immersive world, and what to expect from the new state-of-the-art PS2 graphics. Given out to certain attendees at Tokyo Game Show 99 was a press kit with trial discs, pamphlets, and some Gran Turismo stickers. These trial discs are pretty common, but the complete kit is nearly impossible to find now. What's inside the PlayStation 2 pamphlet is actually a rare look at the Dark Cloud beta with some high quality photos. Then there's a short passage which reads, "A boy sets off on an adventure and meets the world and a girl. In the world of traditional role-playing games, that is a point that will not change with the PS2. By looking at the game screen, you can tell that the characters' expressions, backgrounds, and other aspects of the game have been subjected to quite advanced graphics processing. The whole game has the familiar role-playing game style, and we can feel the excitement of this boy who is about to enter the unknown world. We can all look forward to the story of his growth." Dark Cloud was one of the few games to make it into Sony's press book. This game was a top impressive new showing for them. Though small, the passage and screenshots were presented perfectly. This is also the only place where we get to see beta tone with a different facial expression. The intro they wrote here might be the earliest instance they talk about tone, and give slight hints about the gameplay style. The best interview I could find for the demo was in the Japanese magazine Hyper PlayStation. They put together a special edition for the PS2 that they released in November 1999. They really went all out with this one. It has tons of amazing interviews with the creators of the PlayStation 2. It's filled with photos and info from the early days of its development and launch. One of the interviews was with Toshiyuki Miyata, a production manager at SCE. For this interview in particular, we got to see some exclusive details of what Level 5 and Sony had planned with Dark Cloud. They still had a lot to decide on. The first title reads, "Explore the world and look for the items to save the floating continent." Dark Cloud, the long-awaited RPG in which you can create your own floating continent through diorama-style operations. We are getting an overview of its story and systems finally. Approaching SCE's PS2 titles, Dark Cloud, go back and forth between the dungeons to get the key to the floating continent. I decided to get the full interview translated. Let's read through and see what Toshiyuki Miyata has to say about it. He talks about how Dark Cloud was produced, what he finds so interesting about Akihiro Hino's project, and why they're releasing it on the PS2. The first question. First of all, please tell us how Dark Cloud was produced. I've always been in the music industry and have never been in the game production field, so to be honest, I don't know much about games. However, bringing out the potentials from skilled creators is like managing artists. As for Dark Cloud, it was the idea of Mr. Hino from a company called Level 5, and we started by asking him what he was interested in doing. What was it about Mr. Hino's project that you found so interesting? It was about a year ago when I met Mr. Hino and asked him about what he wanted to create. He spoke to me with a twinkle in his eye. He wanted to create software that would allow people to create and enjoy a miniature garden world by themselves. However, it's a bit too much to ask users to create a miniature garden out of the blue, right? So he thought we should let users enjoy building dioramas using the familiar style of RPGs. In that process, people can naturally enjoy the game. I thought that idea was quite interesting. I couldn't fully understand the game when I saw it at Tokyo Game Show the other day, but what exactly is it about? The plot of the story is still in the prototype stage, so it's not completely set in stone, but a terrible demon god appears in this world and attacks the towns and cities, destroying and invading everything in his path. The main protagonist goes out on this journey to bring light back to the land, and at the start of the game he will be standing in the empty diorama field, which is the land destroyed by the demon god. He will start building and creating things from there. The ultimate goal of the game is to turn the diorama field into a holy ground and seal the demon. At the game show, the players were already able to create a whole range of items, but essentially the items that will be needed to develop the floating continent are obtained by gathering information in other towns and searching through dungeons. I saw some running and jumping actions in the game, but will the dungeons and other areas be navigated using the third-person view while making full use of those actions? No, that hasn't been decided yet because we haven't made it to the prototype stage yet. We are in the process of starting to storyboard some ideas though. The game has a concept of time. Is that scheduled to change in real time? Yes, we will. We haven't decided whether to make it real time or not, but we plan to include a certain flow of time. The events in the game may change according to the time. I would like to ask you why you decided to release Dark Cloud on PS2. The beauty of the PS2, as well as its expressiveness, is that it's capable of processing everything through physical calculations. In Dark Cloud, I think the diorama formation, the expression of water, and other areas are very well done. You might have already noticed this, but we are not trying to make this game towards a realistic direction. It's like a realization of the world of Hayao Miyazaki's animated films. It's a new kind of excitement to be able to move around freely in such a world. Is one of the key points the fact that all of the automatic generation is done by arithmetic operations? Yes, if you just look at one photo, it looks like a normal animation. If you take a closer look at the water, light, mapping, etc. though, you will see that this can only be done on the PS2. Do you have any ideas regarding peripherals? In Dark Cloud, each user creates his or her own world. In the discussions with Mr. Hino, we spoke about including features, such as sharing ideas in some way, exchanging data, etc. At the time we spoke, I was thinking maybe the Pocket Station will work fine, but if a high-capacity memory card is available, I might go with that. We are also thinking about options that can be used online. It will be released next winter. The CEO has asked me if I could somehow release the game sooner, but it is an RPG after all. I think that if we don't properly develop the system, the users will not be satisfied. Still, it's a lot of work to get it done in a year, but we'd love to get it out by Christmas. We should let the users enjoy building dioramas using the familiar system of RPGs. In that process, people can naturally enjoy this unique game. Since the founding of SCE, Toshiyuki Miyata has overseen the entire production as general manager of the production division. This is apparently the first time he has been directly in charge of a title. He is in charge of the production department and also produces on several teams. There's a lot to take away from this interview and the game description provided. First is some background about the floating island. With the Dark Palace down on the surface, the island served as a safe haven from the havoc it was wreaking. Maybe the palace was a source of evil that took over the land, and your job would have been to free the places that were occupied by evil. Then at the same time, you could help people who were victims of the antagonist by bringing them to the island and creating your own town that was far from its reach. At the very least, we could tell we'd still be collecting Georama pieces from dungeons at each of the villages. As for the protagonist, who started out in an empty field from the village that the demon god destroyed, that sounds just like how Dark Cloud ended up, so they probably were talking about Naroon, if not the floating island. I don't think it was the floating island, because it seems like the island was always a blank slate for us to build on. You can visit Yellow Drops in the demo, which is a village in the forest that ended up in the full game, so maybe whatever evil was roaming the land couldn't find them in the forest. Everywhere else, we would have to fight through dungeons and free them. That's just my best theory though. If you have any ideas, feel free to post them in the comments. It'd be nice to see some new discussions about the beta going on. Thanks for watching everyone, that's everything I have on Dark Cloud's beta. I hope to keep seeing more footage of this lost gem, and someday the ROM. This is Shaztopia, have a wonderful day.